Welcome in, everybody. Let's speculate on, will it be a good year for science fiction in 2024? I mean, we obviously hope so, right? But with the most recent flops of the highly anticipated Rebel Moon and the certainly long groan that was the Doctor Who specials released on Disney Plus in December, I mean, those were probably two of the higher anticipated projects of certainly the last quarter or two of 2023. And they were, they were terrible. In the Doctor Who specials, I'd say the first one was awful. The second one, where the Doctor is on the big spaceship at the end of reality, and then the third one, I believe it was, the third one, where he's fighting the Toymaker. The Toymaker comes back. That one was good. And then the last one with the new Doctor's just god awful. It was, it was so terrible. Well, both of these projects got a whole bunch of mixed reviews and condemnation all across the board. And looking towards 2024, I mean, her project's not coming out till I think 2026, but one of the last things that we got was the announcement of the next run of Star Wars films. And the first one is going to be about Rey rebuilding the Jedi Order. And the director of this movie is a literal activist. She said in a big interview, a panel interview that's been going around for a good couple of days now, that she's not actually a filmmaker, that she is an activist, and she doesn't have any training in these are her words. She doesn't have a film degree. She got her degree in political science and economics. And I'm like, dude, if you want to be an activist, go for it. Make those films. Don't touch Star Wars, please. Star Wars doesn't need to be an activist film. It needs to be Star Wars. It can have, some subtext in it. Star Wars has had subtext for forever. It can have layers, sure, but don't make that the chief part of the movie. Don't make that your first foot forward. It just doesn't look good. So things are not too hopeful there. Granted, in 2023, we did have some saving graces with They Clone Tyrone. Oh, it was such a good movie. It was a fantastic sci-fi comedy action film. We had Guardians of the Galaxy 3. That was really fun. We had Blue Beetle, which I think was really underrated. It got kind of meh-ish reviews and reception. We had Justice League Warworld on HBO, which is probably one of the only animated DC projects to ever really bore me in the last 10 years. We had Transformers Rise of the Beasts, which was okay, but it's nothing too groundbreaking there. It's just a normal, everyday Transformer movie. Nothing too special about them. Now, there were a handful more projects in 2023 that I never even heard of, including a new Alien movie, Alien Invasion. That was on Freevee and Amazon Prime. Hell, I found it on YouTube. It's very much a bottom of the barrel film. It's no wonder that I hadn't heard of it at all. It's pretty cheesy, pretty kind of lame. It's got some really basic 80s tropes. It's got the troublesome teens doing what they aren't supposed to. They run across this house where a scientist is working on a xenomorph egg, and hilarity ensues. But the real problem with the movie lies in that the effects, which are mostly practical effects, they're kind of lame. And practical effects were a great staple in what made the 80s action thriller movies so cool. But yeah, overall, it was just a total stinker. I think the really mid part of this past year's sci-fi was actually found in Star Wars. We got the third season of Mandalorian, which was not good at all, aside from a handful of scenes. I cannot forgive the way that this show wasted guest stars like Jack Black or Christopher Lloyd. I mean, it was pretty sad. And the show isn't really about Din Djarin and his fatherhood with Grogu as much anymore. It's more become about Bo-Katan and her retaking Mandalore. I mean, why? Like, why? What for? Like, this season is so alien to what the first season was, and it's strange to the second season, even though the second season's kind of what got us here in the first place. But I mean, it's a very different show now. It's become really, really different. We got the first season of Ahsoka, which I give maybe a 7 out of 10, because there were a few things here and there that not only I didn't care for, but the majority of fans didn't care for. They didn't really make sense. But they weren't so terrible that I turned the show off entirely. And I mean, the scenes with Anakin, the actual flashbacks of the Clone Wars, even if it was kind of misty and whatever, but I get it's supposed to be like some ethereal experience. But oh my God, those were beautiful, gorgeous scenes. Baylan Skoll, obviously, R.I.P. Ray Stevenson. Baylan Skoll is one of the most interesting characters, and that's I think a great example of what we mean when we say we want original characters, because Baylan Skoll wasn't anything before this show, but he came in, and I was way more interested in him than what was going on with Ahsoka. I mean, Ahsoka was just this lousy stick in the mud for most of the show, and I was wrapped up in him and his apprentice, and waiting for the big reveal with Thrawn, of course. But yeah, 7 out of 10. But if anything salvaged 2023 for me, I think it was They Cloned Tyrone on Netflix, because wow, I could not stop laughing at this movie, and I was pulled in at every turn by intrigue and conspiracy and good old sci-fi horror and mystery. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's great. It's got Jamie Foxx, it's got John Boyega in it. I give it a 10 out of 10 recommendation. Go check it out immediately. So, based on what we've seen with the projects from this past year, and, judging by the general vibe in Hollywood and what's going on in the zeitgeist of the world today, we can be hopeful for what's to come in 24. I say that with, all due grain of salt, but let's see what's slated to be released here. One of the first releases that we have been waiting for a while is Dune Part 2. And the first part was pretty mediocre to me at first. It left out a ton of details from the book, and I'm not necessarily a purist, but when the details are an integral part of the story, then it really does start to matter. I like to contrast how this story is handled with Peter Jackson making the Hobbit trilogy. Now, that was based on a relatively short book, and there were 3 movies fleshing it out. Each one of those had director's cuts that added about 20 to 30 minutes per movie, so there's a lot that is compounded into these tiny books. And a lot of it is also inferred from the general lore built up around the universe of the story. And Dune certainly has that. Dune has an enormous chunk of lore, an enormous universe that its story is contained in. So Dune has 2 movies, and it's coming from a rather large book. A really big story with a ton of important details that so far they're seeming to get kind of pushed to the side. And some of these details are ones that are better when they're revealed and explained organically. Otherwise, we would just have a film of it would be a vlog, right? It would be exposition instead of action and adventure and giant space worms and a psychic kid that becomes a giant space worm eventually. Spoilers, but But are we excited for it? Are we really wanting this movie? I'll definitely watch it, but I'm not hyped for it. I really do want to see Christopher Walken as the Emperor, though. I want to see if we get really serious or silly Christopher Walken, because there's no in between with that guy. He's a national treasure. He's a legend. There's also this new addition to the rebooted Planet of the Apes franchise. This one is called Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Kind of an awkward name there, but the trailer looks great. It seems like the early days of ape supremacy on the Earth. We can clearly see the humans are receding into their more docile state. We see all of this natural overgrowth all over the old world now, kind of burying the world of humans. And you get buildings and all of these kinds of things reclaimed by foliage. We see an ape kingdom that's in a crashed tanker cruise ship wreckage. It's on a beach. The CGI looks really good, and it's an original story that's expanding on a beloved franchise. So for this one, yeah, I'm pretty excited about this one. I'm really hyped for it. We have our comic book movies. They are, more often than not, the biggest box office earners, unless we get like a Oppenheimer or a Barbie to blow them out of the water. We've got Deadpool 3 that's supposed to have Wolverine in it, and I mean it's going to be a Deadpool movie, so it's going to be really funny. It's going to be not too shy with gore and fourth wall breaks. It's going to be a blast. Even if a Deadpool movie was bad, it's still funny, and it may even be so bad that it is funny. So that's always a bit of a redeeming quality there. We have Madam Web, which I don't think there's too much excitement about this movie. I'm not excited for it, if I'm being honest, because the trailers just don't do too much for me, and I haven't heard anything about it. Like, I don't see or hear anyone doing any speculative what if or there's no talk around it at all. And for the most of you that don't know who Madam Web is, she is this kind of in the DC universe, she is this kind of, or not DC, I'm sorry, Marvel universe. You have this guy called the Beyonder, who is kind of like the Watcher, but he doesn't. He's a little bit more powerful than the Watcher. He's this cosmic entity, and he trains Madam Web. She's kind of an apprentice to him, or an ally, or whatever. And she becomes this kind of matriarchal, eternal, dimensional being that ends up helping Spider-Man. She's kind of cool. And I guess this is an origin story for her. In the comics and in the 2000s Spider-Man show, she was always depicted as being a lot older. So we'll see how that goes. We have Kraven the Hunter. And I think this is going to be pretty special because it's actually a comic book movie that's rated R. And we hardly get any rated R movies anymore, unless they're horror films. And really, that's only to cover the suspense, the gore, the body horror, things like that. And considering who the movie's about, I mean, it's easy to imagine the R rating is covering a wide array of violence, which will be just what DC needs if they can do it right. Because you have violence in comic book movies, but I mean, it's somebody gets hit, they go flat, right? There's no blood splatter. There's no the movie that pushed the envelope for me in that regard is Multiverse of Madness, where you have Scarlet Witch just tearing people apart. That was pretty great. I think that was a step in tearing open that envelope and allowing for future comic book movies to really give us all that they can, instead of being, very clean or whatever. Yeah, I think it's going to be something that DC really needs. Now, we were supposed to get the Thunderbolts this year with Harrison Ford as General Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, but due to the writers and actor strikes, it was delayed until 2025. And that's really a shame, because Harrison is kind of getting up there. Old boy's like 81, 82 now. So they gotta, if they want him, they they're gonna have to get on the ball with that. Like he did Dial of Destiny, and I I know he had, stunt doubles and CGI de-aging and all that kind of good stuff, so he didn't do too much, but boy, you can only use him for so long. There's going to be Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scar Giver, and again, it's just not looking forward to this. Unless it has more Anthony Hopkins Deer King robot in it. Like I said in my part 1 review, if the character I want more of is in the movie for all of 10 minutes and that's all we get, there is something seriously wrong with your movie. This to me was one reason I knew the film was bad, when I compared it to other movies like Star Wars and the 1989 Batman. Both of those movies had characters that were henchmen, but they never really talked, right? But everybody loved Bob, the henchman for the Joker, and Boba Fett, henchman for Jabba the Hutt, right? They were only in those movies for like 5-10 minutes. Anthony Hopkins' robot shares the same amount of screen time, has the same effect, but the film he's surrounded in just sucks by comparison. It's not gripping in enough to make me forget a character that I only saw for a really short amount of time. And God, I really didn't like Rebel Moon. So you can probably tell how much I'm anticipating part 2. And we're also getting Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, which looks pretty stellar to say the least. I'm actually pretty excited about this one. I mean, it's more giant monsters fighting. It's the best. Who doesn't love that? There's also the Ghostbusters Frozen Empire movie. There's a lot of Empire and Kingdom themed films coming up this year. And the Ghostbusters trailer opens like a natural disaster film. And I kind of like that, because they're doing more and newer creative things in regards to presenting their supernatural phenomena, right? Their big bads are coming in a not a rehashed way. This is very fresh feeling, right? Plus, Paul Rudd is a Ghostbuster now, so that'll be really fun to see. There's going to be a new Power Rangers movie with The Legend of the White Dragon. And there's not too many details out on this right now. Just some stills and artwork that look pretty dope. And it's going to have Johnny Young Bosch in it, so I'm already 100% on board with that. And there's a few smattering of other projects going on, like Sonic the Hedgehog 3. There's a good amount of foreign and indie films. There's going to be another notch in the Mad Max franchise. So there's a decent amount of stuff to come out this year. There's a few things that have some promise, but it's nothing too groundbreaking. And I feel like the strikes that went on for a few solid months in the middle of 2023, I think that's really what put the nail in the coffin of there not being a ton coming out this year. Not just sci-fi, but just a ton in general. But something I guess I never really get heard talked about, at least I don't think so, is exactly what it is that a greater audience that takes in sci-fi films and in shows and projects, what we really want to see. What do we want out of a good sci-fi project? I think that in itself is a whole other episode. Maybe a guest spot or two. We'll see. But for now, live long and prosper, my friends, and may the Force be with us all.